Everyone you meet in life has something that sets them apart. For the lucky ones, it's wealth, talent, intelligence, or good looks, advantages that push them ahead of the competition. But for those less fortunate, their so-called gifts often serve as cautionary tales, reminders of life's harsh realities. My buddy Jake has always had his own unique talents. He's got a knack for pure, unfiltered chaos, the human equivalent of a wrecking ball. If there's a way to take something good and turn it into an absolute disaster, Jake's done it. And he's got the scars to prove it. Think Wreck-It Ralph, but without the Disney charm. If there was ever a way to push things past the limits of social norms, Jake figured it out, tried it, and probably got banned from at least one establishment for it. Naturally, he picked up the nickname Wrecker Jake, or sometimes just Demolition Man, because if something could be broken, destroyed, or flipped upside down, he was your guy. A great friend, as long as you stayed on his good side. I met Emily 3 years after college, and, in a moment of brilliance, or stupidity, depending on how you look at it, I married her. She was smoking hot with a body that made it impossible to think straight. So yeah, it's no shock that I had my head so far up my own ass that I didn't see the warning signs. I knew from the start that she wasn't exactly the nurturing, loving type, but at the time, I didn't care. She had 2 qualities that mattered most to a superficial idiot like me. She looked like a porn star, and, more importantly, she fucked like one too. It's a well-documented fact that men will ignore a woman's attitude and personality flaws as long as she keeps him too distracted to think straight. You'd think guys would wise up to this, but let's be honest. You wouldn't be surprised at all. We think with our dicks until life slaps us hard enough to teach us otherwise. Some men learn to think with their hearts and find romance. Others wise up and use their heads to build solid relationships. And then there are the dumbass like me, who let their dicks lead them straight to a lawyer's office. During our relationship, Emily only met Jake once, while he was home on leave. She'd met my other friends and got along with them fine, mostly because they were normal. I had tried to warn her about Jake, but she didn't really get it. To her, he was just some wild guy with funny stories. She laughed when I told her about the shit he'd pulled, not realizing those weren't exaggerations. Stories about someone else's chaos are hilarious, until you're caught in the middle of it. It became a lot less funny when people started associating her with the guy who once got stopped by the cops for setting up mousetraps all over a Chuck E. Cheese, shouting that he was finally going to kill that giant rat. Or the time he walked into a Walmart, went behind a register, and started scanning people's groceries, despite never working there. Most of his antics were dumb but harmless. Others, well, let's just say they pushed the limits. Luckily for him, our hometown was like a lot of small towns, where having family in the right places made all the difference. Jake dodged charges more times than I can count, thanks to the fact that half of his cousins were on the police force. His uncle was the sheriff, and his godmother, the sheriff's wife, was also the damn judge. Even with all that protection, the family had started warning him to tone it down. But, as expected, Jake ignored them. That was until he really pissed off the judge. See, Jake thought it would be a good idea to go blast fishing in the town reservoir, right when they were trying to restock it. That wouldn't have been the end of the world, except the judge and her husband loved to fish there. So, when she found out, she gave him 2 options. Join the army or spend a year in county jail. And just like that, Jake became a proud soldier. While Jake was off serving his country, I was busy settling into married life with my walking wet dream of a wife. Emily and I had a pretty normal marriage, at least in the beginning. We both wanted to focus on our careers before having kids. Traveling the world is a lot easier when you don't have to worry about finding a sitter or packing diapers. Things were good, until suddenly, they weren't. At first, the changes in Emily weren't huge, just little things. She started acting different, though not in any obvious way. She was more distant, more distracted. I noticed it, but every time I brought it up, she brushed it off. Nothing was wrong. Everything was fine. Then, one day, I came home from work and found her wedding ring sitting on the kitchen table. I tried talking to her, desperate for an explanation, but all I got were the same tired excuses. It's not you. It's me. I'm just going through something right now. The kind of bullshit people say when they don't have the guts to tell you the real reason. Deep down, I knew something shady was going on, but I wasn't ready to face it. Then, as if the universe was mocking me, I got served with divorce papers. On the same afternoon, we were throwing Jake's welcome home party. The papers were standard. Irreconcilable differences. A clean, even split. No real explanation. I didn't even bother reading them. I just tossed them on the table and left for the party. I wasn't about to let my failed marriage ruin the night. Jake was finally home, and, honestly, I'd missed the hell out of him. When I saw him walk in, I pulled him into a hug, but his reaction was immediate. "What the fuck is wrong with you?" I shook my head. "It's nothing. Don't worry about it. We're here to celebrate you coming home." I handed Jake a drink and clinked my bottle against his. "Glad to have you home, man." He gave me a long look, like he knew something was up. "Yeah, right," he said, clearly not buying it. Then, a familiar grin spread across his face. "But you know what? You're right. It is good to be home." That night, we had a few shots. And by a few, I mean we drank the bar dry, forcing them to make a run to the liquor store to restock. Eventually, we got kicked out, not the first time, definitely not the last. Naturally, we ended up at the town's finest 24-hour dining establishment, where the food was 90% grease and 10% regret. Once the noise of the party faded and the quiet hum of the diner took over, Jake finally asked the question I knew was coming. "All right, what the hell happened?" I sighed, swirling my drink. "I don't know, man. Everything was fine. Then it got weird. Then she left. She dropped the divorce papers on me hours before your party. I still don't even know why." As always, Jake didn't waste time sugarcoating things. "So, who's she fucking?" I blinked. "I don't know." Jake took all of 4 seconds to think before nodding like he had it all figured out. "Okay, here's the plan. We fuck up her life first. Then, we find out who he is, and we fuck up his life too." For the first time in weeks, I actually smiled. Is it that simple? Of course it is. She's gone, dude. You can't go back to that bitch after what she did. So why waste time crying about it? Even if she walked back through that door, would you ever trust her again? Fuck no. Exactly. He grinned. That stupid, reckless grin I'd seen 100 times before, usually right before something completely unhinged happened. "I'm on terminal leave for the next month, which means I've got plenty of time to help with this. You handle the lawyer. I'll handle the rest." I laughed, shaking my head. "What the fuck are you gonna do?" "Don't worry about it, bro. I got this." We finished eating our greasy meals, called a ride, and crashed at my place for the night. The next morning, I woke up around 11 a.m. to the sound of voices outside. Rubbing my eyes, I shuffled over to the window, only to see my driveway completely packed with my shit. People were rummaging through piles of furniture, clothes, and random household items like it was a garage sale. Some woman was holding up a blender like she was appraising a rare artifact. I walked outside, coffee in hand, and spotted Jake standing proudly in the middle of it all. That's when I saw the hand-drawn sign he had taped to the garage door. I took a slow sip of coffee before turning to Jake. "What the hell are you doing?" He grinned. "What does it look like?" "I'm making you some money." I glanced around. "And how exactly do you know what's Emily's and what's mine?" "Easy." He gestured toward the mess. "If it looks like chick shit, I'm selling it, because it's probably hers. If it looks classy, I'm also selling it, because it sure as hell isn't yours. You've got terrible taste, especially in women." I shrugged. Fair points. At this stage, there was no point in stopping him. I felt mildly bad about selling off some of the stuff, especially the family heirlooms Emily had loved. But honestly, I didn't care anymore. Jake handed me a stack of printed papers with a smirk. "Oh, and get this. She's an even bigger dumbass than I thought." "How so?" "She didn't bother logging out of her Gmail on your home computer before she left." I glanced down at the papers. It didn't take long to figure out what I was looking at. Emily had been fucking some guy named Tim, a coworker. They had been hooking up for a while, exchanging messages and plenty of photos. Jake shook his head. "You really should have known better than to marry a chick with a tramp stamp of a butterfly on her ass." I let out a dry laugh. "Yeah, guess I was blind." "No shit, Sherlock. Because you trusted her. But that's done now. Time to move the fuck on." I sighed. tossing the papers onto a nearby table before turning my attention to an older woman browsing through the pile of clothes. She was eyeing Emily's wedding dress. "How much?" she asked. I considered it for a second before responding. $20. Her eyes widened. 20? This dress is worth at least 500. I grinned. I know. The deal was done. And honestly, I couldn't wait to tell Emily someday that her $5,000 wedding dress sold for $20 as one final, glorious fuck you. While Jake continued running his cheating bitch sale, I grabbed my phone and fired off a text to a friend of mine, a lawyer who sold his soul daily as a family practice attorney. His response came back almost immediately. "Come by my office. Let's handle this shit." It was time to end this marriage. I left the lawyer's office in the afternoon, signed documents in hand, and headed home. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the house was practically empty. Jake had been busy. The place was stripped down to the bare essentials, just enough for a guy to survive. No decorations, no extra furniture, just the basics. Jake, ever the overachiever, was taping up a large box with Emily's stuff, scrawled in big, bold letters on the side. He grinned when he saw me. "How'd it go with the lawyer?" "Fine. No issues." I tossed the papers onto the counter. "The agreement's fair, so I signed it. The courts wouldn't give me a better deal anyway." Jake nodded. "Good. When did your sale end?" "About an hour ago. I had to make a quick supply run, but I'm done now. That's all that's left of her crap." He handed me an envelope. Her cut of the sale came to $214.65. "Make sure she gets her half." I laughed. "Her half, huh?" Jake smirked. "I'm nothing if not fair. We should probably drop this off at her parents' house. No reason for her to come back here looking for it." "Agreed. Let's dump it and go grab some food." I knew that her wedding dress alone had cost as much as a used car, so I was positive Jake hadn't gotten the best deals. But honestly, I didn't give a shit. I just wanted it out of my house so I could start fresh. I bent down to pick up the box, but Jake grabbed it first. "I got it. You drive. You know where her parents live." When we pulled up to Emily's parents' house, her father, Simon, answered the door. His face tensed the second he saw me, like he already knew why we were there. I didn't waste time. "We're here to drop off Emily's stuff." Simon let out a sigh. "Listen, I just want to say..." I cut him off. "Did you know she was cheating on me?" He hesitated. Then, without meeting my eyes, he nodded. "Yes." I exhaled sharply, shaking my head. "Thanks for that, Simon. You raised a great daughter." Jake set the box on their dining table, and I happened to glance inside. I immediately did a double take, because right there, sitting boldly on top of Emily's things, was a massive dildo, easily a foot long, complete with cartoonishly large, hairy balls. Next to it, a stack of big black dick porn DVDs. I barely held it together. There was also a fire extinguisher in there, and at this point, I didn't even want to know why. I clenched my jaw, fighting back laughter as I turned to Simon. "Just tell Emily I signed the papers. My lawyer will be in touch with hers." I couldn't stick around. I was seconds away from breaking down into laughter, so I forced myself to shake my head in mock disgust and walked out before I lost it completely. Simon stood there, looking like he wanted to crawl into a hole and die. The moment we got back in my truck, I burst out laughing. "Holy shit, Jake. How big was that dildo? And what the hell else did you put in there?" Jake smirked, clearly pleased with himself. 12 inches long, 6 inches wide. I have no idea how big the balls are, but they felt substantial. I wiped tears from my eyes. The balls were a nice touch. Thought so. That dinner was one of the best I'd had in months. Jake regaled me with stories from his army years. Some I'd heard before, but hearing them in person made them even better. For the first time in a long while, I actually felt good. Emily had made my life miserable for so long that I didn't even realize how much lighter I felt now that she was out of it. When we got home, I decided to check the house phone. Emily and I still had one of those rare landlines, bundled with the internet package, so I figured I might as well see if she'd called. Oh boy. Her 2-minute-long voicemail was pure, incoherent rage. She was screaming so hard that half the words were lost in static, but I managed to pick up. "Cell phone. Huge dildo. Hairy balls. My father thinks I'm pregnant. Big black dicks. I checked my cell phone. No messages from her. But then I noticed something. Her contact was blocked. I turned to Jake, raising an eyebrow. You've been busy today. He grinned, handing me a beer. I do what I can. I sipped my beer. Okay, I understand most of her rant. But what the hell was that about pregnancy? Jake smirked. Ah yeah, that was a gamble. I may have drawn some extra lines on a pregnancy test with a Sharpie. I stared at him. You faked a positive pregnancy test? He shrugged. I mean, kinda. The problem was, Emily or her mom might have caught it immediately. But her dad? That was my best bet. If he saw it first and freaked out before double-checking, then mission accomplished. I let out a deep sigh. Jesus Christ, man. Jake took another sip. Hey, something worked. She's losing her goddamn mind. With the divorce in motion, Emily no longer felt the need to hide her boy toy, Tim, the coworker she'd been screwing behind my back. I'd met Tim once or twice at office events, but he was just another guy in the background. A nobody. Then, a few days later, I was grabbing coffee downtown when I noticed something pinned to the community bulletin board. A flyer. I plucked it off the board and stared at it, already knowing who was behind it. When I got home, I tossed it onto the table in front of Jake. Cute. He looked over it with an innocent expression. I have no idea what you're talking about. The flyer featured a very compromising photo of Emily and Tim. The naughty parts were covered up, but it was clear what they were doing. Below the image, big, bold letters spelled out, "This is Jenna and her new man Tim, not her husband. Just so you know." And the best part? The distribution had started at their office and spread outward from there. I crossed my arms. How many of these did you put out? Jake shrugged. A few thousand. How'd you find the time? Easy. I paid a bunch of bored teenagers $20 each to hang them everywhere. Even if some got trashed, they still got to cause chaos. And isn't that what being a teenager is all about? I shook my head, laughing as I pressed play on the next voicemail message from Emily. Her voice exploded through the speakers. Mall. Work thinks I'm a whore. I grinned. She's losing it. Then, Emily shrieked. Homeless guy with a sign. I turned to Jake, confused. Okay, that one I don't get. Jake smirked and handed me his phone. On the screen was a video of a scruffy-looking guy twirling a sign that read, "A cheating bitch lives here." I raised an eyebrow. Jake took a sip of beer. He's not actually homeless. He's a veteran. His wife cheated on him while he was deployed in Afghanistan. He was more than happy to expose a cheating whore, even if it wasn't his own. I laughed, clinking my beer against his. You, my friend, are an evil genius. Jake grinned. I do what I can. The divorce was moving forward. And Emily? She was miserable. Perfect. A few days later, another voicemail from Emily landed on the house phone. This time, it was pure, unfiltered rage, complete with shrieking about cowbells, Game of Thrones, and the High Sparrow's shame walk. At this point, the fun wasn't just listening to her meltdowns. It was trying to guess what Jake had done based purely on her incoherent ranting. As usual, Jake handed me a beer and queued up a video on his phone. You're gonna love this one. The screen lit up with the unmistakable sound of a bell ringing. The camera panned to Juan, the not actually homeless sign spinner from before, now decked out in High Sparrow robes, standing in front of a Red Lobster. Emily looked horrified. Tim looked like he wanted to melt into the floor, and Maria, Juan's very pissed-off girlfriend, was leading the charge. Maria, as it turned out, had been dying for some revenge of her own. Her ex-husband had left her while she was pregnant, and she had never quite let that anger go. So, when she heard about what Emily had done, she saw it as therapeutic to get involved. And oh, did she get involved? Maria's booming voice filled the restaurant as she rang her bell with righteous fury. Shame. Shame on the cheating whore. May the Red Lobster never serve her Cheddar Bay biscuits again. I took a long sip of beer, trying not to laugh. This happened at a Red Lobster? Jake snorted. Yeah, man. Nothing but class for those two. I smirked. At least no one got naked this time. Jake slammed his hand on the table. Fuck. I knew I forgot something. I laughed. Guess we'll have to make up for that by hitting the strip club. Jake grinned. Your logic is flawless, my friend. And with that, we grabbed our keys and headed off to the local gentleman's club to correct this grave oversight. The night was exactly what we needed. Cold beer, good music, and some very talented women doing what they do best. At some point, a dancer, going by the shockingly original name of Ebony, flashed a smile at Jake. He wasted no time showering her with cash, swearing up and down that there definitely is sex in the champagne room. There was. Or at least, there would have been. If the two enormous bouncers hadn't interrupted things. Jake stumbled out of the club an hour later, still looking dazed and slightly in love. I think I'm gonna marry that woman, he sighed dreamily. Uh-huh. I shook my head, amused. So, how exactly did you end up in her car? He smirked. Oh, that was easy. The real mystery is why she kept raving about mothballs. I frowned. What? Jake's grin widened. Did you know that if red bell peppers sit long enough, they start smelling like mothballs? The internet is an amazing place. I stared at him for a long moment before sighing. You, my friend, need help? I took another sip of beer, eyeing Jake. You know, you've gone really hard on Emily, but Tim's gotten off way too easy. Jake smirked. Has he? I raised an eyebrow. I mean, you have something planned, right? Oh, don't worry, Timmy boy's been dealing with his own problems. I waited. Jake leaned back, taking a slow sip. He's had to change his cell phone 3 times this month. I frowned. Why? Jake grinned. Because apparently he's the most eligible bachelor on Grindr, Scruff, Jacked, Hornet, and FarmersOnly.com. I choked on my drink. Farmers only? Jake nodded solemnly. Gay farmers need love too. I wiped my mouth, still laughing. You're a goddamn menace. Jake smirked. I try. About a week later, Jake's Uncle Sly, the sheriff, dropped by. I'd always gotten along great with Jake's family, so I handed him a beer as he sat down. He took a long sip before sighing. All right, where's my idiot nephew today? I smirked. He took off to Mexico with his new girlfriend last Friday. The sheriff raised an eyebrow. So, he hasn't been in town? Nope. He's been gone for days. Why? Right then, the house phone started ringing. Sheriff Sly turned to me. You gonna get that? I took a sip of beer. Nope. Just saving evidence of my lunatic ex's mental breakdowns. I pressed play on the voicemail. Emily's voice screeched through the speaker. Lawn. Grass. Dead. Cheating bitch. I took another swallow of beer. Guessing my wife's office is having lawn maintenance issues. The sheriff sighed. They swear it was Jake. But, well, if he's really in Mexico, that's a solid alibi. I shrugged. Call him yourself. So the sheriff dialed Jake's number. A moment later, a very breathless female voice answered. Hi. Ralph's busy right now. Can I help you? Then came the unmistakable sounds of skin slapping against skin. Oh, baby. Right there. Yes. The sheriff and I both choked on our beers. The sheriff sighed. Honey, I just need to confirm, where are you two right now? Jake's voice suddenly took over. We're in Cancun, Uncle Sly. Just enjoying the local sights. I'll email you my flight itinerary later, but I'm pretty sure whatever's going on is just a bunch of punk teenagers. Anyway, gotta go. I'm kinda busy right now. Bye. The sheriff handed me back my phone, finished his beer, and walked out, laughing the whole way. Finally, the divorce was finalized. IWS free. Jake promised that once the papers were signed, he'd let it all go. But, not quite yet. He smirked. We have to end on a high note. I eyed him warily. Can you even top what you've already done? Jake put a hand to his heart, feigning offense. My good sir, you wound me with your lack of faith. And that's when the phone rang. Emily's voice exploded through the speaker. You sick fuck. Church. Grandmother. Elvis. Strappin'. Whole congregation. I turned to Jake, horrified. What the fuck did you do? Jake just grinned and opened his iPad. And there it was. A 4-foot-tall Elvis impersonator, standing at the altar, publicly confessing to banging my ex-wife. But it got worse. Elvis got down on one knee and proposed. Emily's grandmother fainted. Her dad threw up. Tim ran for the exit. Her mom burst into tears. And Jake? Jake just handed me a beer. Hail to the king, baby. I didn't go for crazy revenge myself. Instead, I started dating Emily's former best friend. And tonight, I'm proposing. With Jake's new best friend, 4-foot Elvis, personally delivering the wedding invitation to Emily. Some revenge is best served cold. But some you serve wearing blue suede shoes. Until next time, dear listener, if you've made it this far, hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you don't want to miss what happens next.